Okay, hello everyone. It's 10 o'clock on the dot, so we are going to kick off. Thank you for joining this BSI webinar this morning on food loss and waste, strategies and solutions. I'm Emily Field. I'm the food sector lead here at BSI. With me today are my colleagues Doris and Louise to help with all things technical. If you're joining us for the first time today, BSI is the UK's national standards body. We convene experts on particular topics to develop standards, typically voluntary, guidance that promotes safety, efficiency and interoperability in various industries. We do work under a memorandum of understanding with the UK government, so we are acting in the UK's national interest. We represent the voice of the UK in international standards making, and our goal is to ensure that through standards we support business and society to accelerate progress towards a sustainable world. So before we kick off, a few housekeeping points. This is a listen-only webinar that is being recorded. There will be time at the end for some questions, so please do post your questions into the Q&A function. And if you experience any technical difficulties, my colleagues Doris and Louise will be able to help you solve those, and please do submit them in the Q&A function so we can best respond to any issues you might experience. After the webinar, we will be sending out a feedback survey to help us continually improve how we deliver our webinars. Upon completion of the feedback survey is when you'll receive a link to the recording of the webinar, so do keep an eye out for that, and we really appreciate your feedback. And then just finally, so this is a CPD recognised webinar, so if you're a CPD member, you can request your certificate via the feedback survey and gain membership points. So today's topic, food loss and waste, strategies and solutions. So let's understand the issue and impact of food loss and waste, as well as hear how new ISO can help businesses on their food loss and waste journey. We have a great lineup of speakers today. We have with us Dr. Liz Goodwin from the World Resources Institute, who will kick us off shortly with her opening address, looking into the issue of food loss and waste. We will then hear from Richard Swannell, Director of Impact Growth at WRAP, to talk to us about impact and progress so far. We will then hear from Gökçe Gültekin and learn about Dannon's zero waste journey before finally turning to Iona Huang from Harper Adams University. And Iona will be talking to us all about the new international standard and how it can support organisations with their food loss and waste journey. Very much looking forward to that. The webinar will close at 11:30, and just a reminder once again, do submit your questions for the Q&A so I can pose those to our panelists. So that leaves me now with the pleasure of introducing our first speaker, Dr. Liz Goodwin. So Liz, over to you. Thanks, Liz.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Emily. And thank you very much for the invitation to talk to you all today. The issue of food loss and waste has been a core part of my life for the last 20 years. Also, initially at WRAP, where we were doing a lot of research into food waste, and I was chief exec there. But then 9 years ago, I joined the World Resources Institute, and that's now my focus is on global food loss and waste and how we address that. I'm sure that there are lots of very knowledgeable people who've joined this webinar today. So much of what I'm going to talk about is not news to you, but it's always worthwhile reminding ourselves of the scale of the problem and how we need to try and tackle it. So next slide, please. So people are probably aware of these figures. It's still estimated that we waste or lose roughly 1/3 of all the food between production and our plates. More recent estimates are actually higher than that, where they've also included food that's lost at farm level, and which would suggest it's around 40%, which is well, bonkers, crazy, whatever you want to call it. You know, we put a lot of effort into that food, and we then waste or lose nearly half of it. It costs the global economy around $1 trillion every year, which is $1 trillion we can't really afford. And importantly, from an environmental point of view, it represents 8 to 10% of greenhouse gas emissions. And we all know the challenges we face in trying to achieve the Paris Climate Agreement. And the estimates are that without tackling food loss and waste, we will not achieve those Paris Agreement targets, and we will not have any chance of achieving a 1.5 degree temperature rise. So food loss and waste is really important from that point of view, but also more fundamentally, it's important because if you want to have a sustainable food system, you need to try to reduce the loss and waste from the system. And the amount of food loss and waste we have at the moment, it means we're wasting a quarter of all the water used in agriculture, which again is shocking given the amount of water scarcity problems around the world. And next slide, please. And I think we all know that it happens all along the supply chain. So it happens at the field level, some where it's left in harvest, it's left in the field, somewhere where it's not even harvested, somewhere it's been poor efficiency harvesting. Then there are problems with storage, problems with the transport and distribution of it. There's problems at the processing stage where it gets spilled and lost. And then there are problems at the market stage where either it doesn't meet the right quality standards, or it goes out of date, or it gets damaged. So it gets lost from the system at that point. And then finally, we all buy too much food and then we don't use what we buy. And so we waste it at home, either because we've let it go out of date or let it rot before we use it, or because we cook too much and then don't use the leftovers. So it's a problem all along the supply chain, and we need to try to tackle it at all those points. It's really important that we try to understand where the worst issues are, and that it differs in different countries and differs for different types of materials. In the UK, we still know that it's probably around 60% of the food waste issue that we have in the UK is at our homes and from our households. Next slide, please. And as I said, this is about a sustainable food system. The irony is we're wasting and losing all this food, but at the same time, we've got 1 in 9 people globally who remain malnourished. So at a macro level, we're producing enough food for the world, but we're clearly not getting it to the people who need it. And we've got this huge dilemma of malnourishment on one side and waste and excess at the other extreme. Next slide, please. So if we think about the benefits of reducing food loss and waste, there's clearly a social benefit, improving the food security for the growing population, feeding hungry people now. But it also helps with all those farmers who are in the field, helps their livelihoods and helps them to improve their ability to operate and to live in a sensible way and in a proper environment where they're able to access education and finance and live fulfilled lives. Environmentally, it helps to protect natural resources, reduces climate change, and then there's the whole economic side. For businesses, it increases your efficiency, it avoids unnecessary costs. You can make things out of the food that isn't suitable for certain applications, and so you can generate new revenue sources. So there are a whole range of benefits from reducing food loss and waste, and in many senses, one would have to say that it's almost impossible to think of anyone thinking food loss and waste is a good thing. Generally, it's a win-win to find ways of reducing it. Next slide, please. But importantly, what's the overall approach? How do you tackle it? I think initially it's important that you set targets because that means that you're prioritizing it. It sets the ambition, and then that motivates action. So having a target or a goal, and that just puts you in the right place to say, right, this is important to us. We're going to do some work. Then the next stage is it's really important to measure, because if you start measuring something, you know where your hotspots are, you know where along that supply chain your issues are, whether it's at the manufacturing stage or the consumption phase, or if it's just back at the farm, which is the biggest problem. As soon as you start measuring, you can see that, and you can then start to manage it. Now, I say measurement, it doesn't have to be to the fifth decimal point, but you can measure it to the degree that you need to actually understand where your hotspots are. And then that drives action, because as soon as you see those hotspots, you realize what the cost is at that particular hotspot, and you can then take action, and you can work out what the action should be. And as I say, it applies all the way along the supply chain, right through from production to consumption. Next slide, please. So we've talked to, certainly within WRI and within the whole of the community of organisations trying to raise awareness about food waste and to take more action on it. We talk about Target, Measure, Act as a management approach. That's a very simple, complex concept. So it's three words, and it can be applied to all the scenarios. Food loss and waste is very complex. It happens in different parts of the supply chain. The issues are very different. The types of waste are very different. We've got different definitions of what a waste and a loss is, and that's confusing in itself, because people don't know whether it's a loss or a waste, and does it really matter, and you certainly can't add those two figures together. Measurement is a key component, and as I say, I've joined WRI about 9 years ago, and we started off by producing this food loss and waste protocol and standard, which was an approach to measurement, which we produced in 2015 to help standardize and ensure more consistency in measurement. And that really set the standard, and it was developed by a consortium of organizations, including RAP, and you're going to hear from Richard shortly. But that standard, I think, has stood the test of time, and it is now being incorporated and built on in the new ISO standard that we've been working on. So we had this standard, and we've had the standard for a number of years, but the need for an international standard was really recognised by the Danish government a number of years ago, about 5 years ago, and they realised that actually, if we want to move this on to the next stage, we need to put it into an ISO standard, because that would ensure global consistency, and we can make it not just about measurement, but about actually adopting a management approach, which would drive improvements globally. And so the Danish government sponsored the development of the management standard ISO 20001. And next slide, please. So my involvement and WRI's involvement in the ISO standard, I was asked to chair the subcommittee that was set up to lead this development of the standard. And that was set up about 5 years ago. So it's been going on for a long time, but we had to initially work out what we were trying to develop. Were we trying to develop something around measurement, or were we trying to develop something around management, or both? So there was a lot of getting that common understanding. But I think the other thing which happened was we brought together experts from food loss. So we had experts who knew an awful lot about food loss and waste, and were deep into the understanding of what causes it, what it is, how it can be addressed, how it can be measured, all the things that you'd want from real technical experts. But then we also had experts in ISO standards, so they knew what makes an ISO standard work, what are the key requirements of ISO standards. Most of them didn't know very much, if anything, about food loss and waste. So we had these two separate types of expertise, and bringing those two expertise together into one place to actually collaborate and work together took time, but it's been really beneficial, because I mean we've had a number of very lengthy conversations where the food waste experts would say, oh, we need to say this, and the ISO standards would say, well, that's not going to work from a standards point of view, and working through all those issues and coming up with something that meets the needs of the food loss and waste experts, but also meets the needs of an ISO standard. There have been a number of member states involved. I mean, it was been open to all countries to set up mirror committees and to consider the ISO standard. The ones most involved, I think, have been a number of European countries, so Denmark, Sweden, France, Germany, the UK, but also Japan's been very involved because Japan has been doing a lot of work on food waste. Canada has been very involved, Australia, and Mauritius. And Mauritius, I remember that's been really helpful because they have a lot of small organisations, and they kept saying, how is that going to work for a small organisation? How is that going to work in a small island where there isn't the same level of infrastructure? So we've been challenged that we have to produce something that was going to work for all different types of environments. As I said, we've been working on it for 4 to 5 years, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited that we're here today, because we are very close to actually publishing the first draft international standard, which is an important milestone for this piece of work. I think it will move the agenda forward massively because it's our first attempt at trying to specify how one might set up and improve the management of food loss and waste from a professional point of view. And it will be initially targeted at businesses, but it is going to be focused on covering the whole of the supply chain all the way through from farm to fork. And I know you're going to hear later from Iona about the details of the ISO standard, but I think that's an important premise that we've kept in our minds all the time. This has got to apply to the whole of the food system. And so we're going to get the publication of the draft international standard later this summer, hopefully in about August time. And then we're looking forward to all the comments we get back from that. We will then have another meeting as the subcommittee early next year, so that we are then able to publish the international standard in the summer of 2026. And so that's the plan, and it's been a real pleasure to chair this subcommittee. I've learned a lot about ISO standards in the process, and also met some great people and worked with them. So looking forward to hearing the other presentations and to discussing with all of you and answering questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Liz. Yeah, really insightful and some great context for the rest of the webinar. So before I hand over to Richard, we've got a quick poll. We want to hear from the audience. So are you currently measuring food loss and waste? If so, do tell us. So the poll is up now on your screen. So please do submit your answers. We're just going to have about another 10 seconds. All answers welcome. There's no judgment here. We want to hear from you. And we'll just give it a few more seconds. Okay, wow. So yeah, partially is winning. Yeah, that's understandable. Brilliant. Okay, well, it looks like voting has stopped now. So that's great to see. And we look forward to. So 54% have voted, and yeah, 41% partially. So you're partially looking at some areas of food loss and waste, which is great. And later on, there'll be a second poll to hear a little bit more about that, about your barriers. So do keep an eye out for that. So that leaves me now to pass over to Richard. Richard, over to you.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you all this morning. It's my pleasure to talk a little bit more about the impact that's had around the world so far on reducing food loss and waste and what we might learn from that and how that has fed into the development of the ISO standard. So next slide, please. So the first thing just to emphasize is that this is something that has got multilateral and international support. Countries around the world have actually set targets, and those targets have been aligned to the SDG Sustainable Development Goal 12.3, which is to halve food waste by 2030 and to reduce food loss across the supply chain. And so you've got the EU Farm to Fork strategy, and of course EU is actually bringing in mandatory food waste reduction targets for retail, hospitality and food service of 30%. They're likely to come in the autumn, and there's a 10% reduction in manufacturing. Also the UK, Australia, Indonesia, South Africa and Japan as well as others, have 50% food waste reduction targets by 2030. And so there is an international groundswell of action and target setting to actually encourage us all to reduce food loss and waste across the supply chain, in line with, as Liz said, the compelling case for actually tackling food loss and waste. Next slide, please. So when we're looking at reducing food loss and waste and preventing it, what do we actually mean? Well, first, so this is the food loss and waste hierarchy that sort of answers that question. And in essence, preventing food waste in the first place, i.e. making sure it doesn't go to waste, it actually goes to people, is the first thing we need to try and do. And if we've got surplus food and it's suitable for that, then redistribution to those in need is a key priority for that surplus food. And then if that can't go to people, then going to animal feed or bio-based materials or biochemical processing all count as prevention activity. It means that the food does not go to waste or is not recycled. For recycling, like anaerobic digestion and composting, are waste management and circular economy solutions, and to be valued for that effect, but they don't count as prevention against the targets that we are talking about. Next slide, please. So what works to tackle food loss and waste? Well, action in 4 areas have been shown around the world to make a real difference. Setting policy and regulation and providing an environment in which food loss and waste can be tackled effectively and rapidly is a key intervention. Developing food pacts or public-private partnerships between the public sector, the NGOs and businesses has also been shown to actually drive real change rapidly. Encouraging capital investment in terms of introducing technology to reduce food loss and waste also works. And in helping us all reduce food waste in our homes, behaviour change campaigns can also be very powerful and very effective around the world. So all of these are being used, and I'll just talk a little bit more about how they've been integrated and used around the world. Next slide, please. So the enabling policy environment, there's a lot that's been used around this area, and here's just some of the policies that have been implemented. So clear targets, I've already mentioned countries setting targets, and increasingly countries are also integrating food loss and waste into their nationally determined contributions towards climate change, because tackling food loss and waste is a key way of tackling climate change. And so we're seeing an increasing number of countries not only setting targets in their national policies, but also putting it into their NDCs. Landfill bans can be helpful, or taxes or tax escalator. So one thing that's been used in a number of countries is indicating a small tax on landfill, which then increases every year, and that therefore encourages investment in alternative technologies, not only recycling, but also prevention activities. Regulations on food donation and animal feed can make it easier for food to be safely redistributed to those in need, and also safely be fed to animals. And regulations on date labels is often a cause of confusion within the home that can actually drive wasteful behaviours. Getting that and making that as simple as possible has been shown to be effective in reducing food loss and waste. Separately collected food waste in the home, something that's happening in many countries around the world, ranging from Australia, the European Union, and North America, can also face people in their homes with the consequences of their behaviour, so they can see how much food they're wasting, and therefore how much money they're also wasting in that process, can also help to drive change. And encouraging measurement and reporting, building on Liz's Target Measure Act approach, encouraging or making it mandatory for measurement is a good way of businesses actually understanding exactly how much food they're wasting, and the financial as well as the environmental costs associated with that. And another way is to look at regulating supply chain contractual relationships to encourage food loss and waste reduction right across the supply chain. Next slide, please. So the second area that we've looked at is food pacts or public-private partnerships. This is when governments, businesses, local authorities all get together with a common goal of delivering the SDG target of halving food loss and waste by 2030. And it follows the approach that Liz described, setting clear targets, encouraging measurement right across the supply chain, and then acting on that data. So the targets are in line with the SDG 12.3, halving food waste and reducing food loss by 2030. The measurement is that most businesses still around the world don't measure food waste on a regular basis or consistently across the supply chain or consistently throughout their businesses. And it's really important to get that measurement in place, because once you have that measurement, you can then see the opportunities, the scale of the opportunity to actually reduce food loss and waste. And also you can then look at ways of actually acting to reduce it. And in the food packs, not only do we encourage businesses to report annually on what progress they're making, so that we can see where progress is going most rapidly, and also where progress needs some additional support, and also helping businesses see the progress they're making collectively towards a common goal. And then once you've got the measurement in place, then it's all about acting on that data. And by that, we're encouraging businesses as part of the partnerships to act within their own operations, but then also to help their suppliers and their customers reduce food loss and waste. That's a key way of actually driving change. Next slide, please. So just to give you an example of one such food pack, this is the UK food pact. And this has representatives for over 100 businesses across the supply chain, and covers over 80% of the total retail sales within the UK. So action by these companies can actually drive system change across the whole supply chain. Next slide, please. So what approach can companies use to help drive that change, and what approach can be used by those food packs to drive change? Here is one example where you're looking at hotspots across the whole supply chain, studying the loss and waste from the field all the way through to actually being eaten. In this particular case, this is actually a particular example from the north of England, and it's actually the supply chain for a hotel. And just to give you the example, so for 100 potatoes, 2 were lost in the field and left in the field. 9 were lost in grading because nobody had actually looked at the sizes of potatoes for quite a while and accepted gradings which perhaps could have been expanded given the supply chain. 3 were lost in storage, that's pretty good, but 17 were lost in packaging and transportation. There's clearly scope to improve that. 9 were spoiled in the kitchen, and 20 were lost in preparation, simply because the full potato wasn't used as much as it could have been. And then 15 were left on the plate. Now, the numbers aren't particularly important here. It's the analysis that's critical, because what this then tells you is where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck, where to focus your efforts across the supply chain to drive change. This hotspot analysis can really be effective to drive rapid change and save money across the supply chain, as well as reducing food loss and waste. Next slide, please. So what progress has been made on food waste reduction around the world? I just wanted to select some highlights from this. Japanese businesses across Japan have already reduced wasted food by 57%, or 3.1 million tons per year. So the businesses have actually achieved the SDG 12.3 target. In the Netherlands, there's been a significant progress, with retailers reducing food waste by 35%, so nearly over 2/3 of the way to the target, and household food waste has declined by 33%. That's been driven by action on consumer behaviour change campaigns, and also supported by retailers and manufacturers within the Netherlands. And in the UK, the food waste is reduced by 26% in retail businesses and 34% in manufacturing, and by over 1 million tonnes in the home. And we've got some new data coming out next week, which will show even more progress in this particular space, and also shows that just how significant this is in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So progress is being made. Companies are actually acting at scale, and we're beginning to see a real difference going on around the world. Next slide, please. And just to give you a bit more detail, looking at the cumulative impact across the UK. So in terms of food waste reduction from 2010 to 2022, the cumulative reduction was 4.6 million tonnes. This is the attributed impact. So this is the attributed to the interventions such as the UK Food Pact. Food recovery rose from 56,000 tonnes a year to 107,000 a year, so nearly a 90% increase. Greenhouse gas emissions, the cumulative reduction was 5.4 million tonnes. Just shows you what scale you can hit by working on food loss and waste reduction with a consistent basis and actually using Target Measure Act to drive change. And the cost benefit was really quite significant. So for every $1 spent on the program, $4.8 of benefit have been delivered. So just to show this approach can work and make a big difference. Next slide, please. So what we're trying to do now is to actually encourage more rapid reductions in food loss and waste around the world by building a network of food packs that connects countries to scale climate smart solutions and drive systemic change without waste. So far, we have 9 countries committed to working together, all aligned with one global target to halve food loss and waste by 2030. And this is powered by RAP. We act as the secretariat to this group, using this as a vehicle, as a methodology to drive more rapid change around the world. Next slide, please. And this just shows exactly where this is operating. So the UK and the Netherlands and others in the EU, GRAS 2030 in Indonesia, End Food Waste in Australia, the Food Waste Pact there, the KAI Commitment in New Zealand, the Food Loss and Waste Reduction Pact in South Africa, and a new one being developed within Brazil. So this gives you an example of this movement of change is genuinely global in effort. And beginning to really drive change in those countries around the world. Next slide, please. So, in conclusion, we can reduce food loss and waste substantially by combining policy and regulation, food pacts or public-private partnerships, behaviour change campaigns, and encouraging investment. And progress is really being made. We're seeing right across the supply chain, businesses reducing food loss and waste, and we're also seeing reductions in the home in countries as far apart as the Netherlands, the UK, and Japan. The new ISO standard 20001 will help business with the Target Measure Act, and critically, the time to act is now. And if you have a local food pact, I urge you, please accelerate change by joining that pact and making a difference to help the world halve food loss and waste by 2030. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks so much, Richard, for that great presentation. So encouraging to hear about that progress, and I particularly like the story of 100 potatoes. It brings the issue to life in a very tangible way, so many thanks for that. So to hear now a live example of zero waste in progress, we have Gökçe from Danone. Gökçe is the Global Zero Waste Lead. Looking forward to hearing from you, Gökçe. So over to you.
Thank you, Emily. Hello, everyone. As Emily kindly introduced, I'm Gökçe, working at Danone as a Zero Waste Lead. So my ambition is to support our teams on reducing end-to-end operational waste across all regions and categories. And today I'm very excited to be here with you and we'll be sharing how we manage waste in Danone. But before I jump into that, would love to give you more context on Danone. If we move to the next slide, please. So in France, if you go to any household, Danone is this warm local brand, but globally we are one of the major players with a clear vision of bringing health through food to as many people as possible. We do this through 3 main categories. Our first largest category is essential dairy and plant-based, with very well-known brands like Activia, Alpro, Actimel. The second largest category is specialized nutrition, with brands like Optimil for babies and our medical nutrition range under Nutricia brand, and our waters business, including some iconic brands like Evian or Volvic. In 2024, we achieved a turnover of 27.4 billion, and since the 17th, guided by our leadership, Danone has combined economic success with social impact. This commitment you can see on the screen as well shows in our CDP AAA ratings for water, climate and forest for 6 consecutive years now. We are also well on track to reach our ambition to be 100% B Corp certified by the end of 2025. My function sits under Danone's operations team, covering 50,000 people and a supply network of over 150 factories. We produce locally and regionally to serve our diverse markets worldwide. And you can see on the map that our sites are pretty concentrated in Europe and Latin America and North America, with a large number of smaller sites in Mexico and Indonesia, giving us a true global reach. If you go to the next slide. As an operational organization, we fully support Danone's strategic framework, Renew Danone. Our shared vision is to deliver sustainable and competitive growth through consistent value creation. So we work very closely with our internal partners across functions, regions, and categories to transform our business and drive sustainable value. And this commitment comes to life through the focus of 4C, we call it. As in the framework, you can see these 4C stand for cost advantage, carbon reduction, cash efficiency, and customer centricity. So connecting performance with sustainable impact is truly at the heart of Danone. If you go to the next slide, please. Back in 1972, our pioneering CEO, Antoine Ribaud, captured Danone's dual project with a simple statement. Corporate responsibility does not end at the factory gate or at the office door. So fast forward 50 years to another Antoine, our current CEO, and this principle remains at the core of our strategy. In 2022, we brought this to life with our Danone Impact Journey, the framework you're looking at, or compass to drive our mission as a purpose-driven B Corp. And this framework focuses on 3 pillars: health, communities, and nature. Nature is the one that I will be zooming in today with you, as waste sits under this pillar. If you go to the next slide, please. At Danone, we have 2 key levers driving our ambitions. First one is the internal financial program that's called Horizon. This tracks each productivity project's cost savings and how we allocate capital expenditure. And then Danone Impact Journey is a second lever, as mentioned. This is our sustainability framework that connects these efforts to a broader purpose. Our waste program is called Battle Against Waste, and our program is embedded under both of these levers, driving sustainability and performance hand in hand. If you go to the next slide, Battle Against Waste is a dual project driving both financial efficiency, so cost reduction, and as well reducing food waste volume through valorization and reduction. We are committed to Sustainable Development Goals 12.3, so reducing by half or food waste that is not suitable for animal, human consumption or biomaterial processing by 2030. And this program is central to operation and has 3 key pillars. First one is manufacturing. We can call this factory waste to simplify. This is where about 80% of our food waste volumes occurs today. Secondly, supply chain waste, which is where we can call once the product is ready to be shipped, and any waste that occurs from this point onwards, which accounts for the remaining 20% that is under our control. And the third pillar is customer and consumer engagement, where we expand our impact through partners to our end consumers. As Liz mentioned in the beginning, majority of the waste is generated at households, and we're constantly working to help our consumers to waste less. All of this is enabled through strong levers. First of all, we have created a toolkit that I will share more on the next slide. A strong partnership with our internal zone stakeholders to animate this program. And we conduct yearly workshops across different regions to build capabilities and share practices. And of course, our partnership with NGOs, coalitions, and industry peers. If I zoom into our toolkit a bit further, our journey started and continue with deep analysis on where the waste occurs, which Richard made this point also very clearly highlighted. From this analysis, we have identified key waste hotspots and uncovered great best practices happening across our factories and business units worldwide. What we did is we captured these examples, documented them, centralized everything in a practical toolkit that you're looking at, making it very easy for our colleagues to know where to start their journey and then continue to drive impact. Each project is built on proven results and drive strong cross-functional collaboration. If I would pick one to give example on digital manufacturing, for example, these solutions are around automation on the process lines, which requires a strong collaboration, especially within the factory teams, process engineers, performance teams, and IT teams. If we go to the next slide, of course, reduction is our main ambition. However, valorization is as important. So once the food waste is unavoidable, where do we send it? So at Danone, we have created a clear guidelines to help our teams to manage food waste responsibly. We have taken the SDG 12.3 food waste hierarchy and simplified it a little bit for our teams, and developed as well a practical decision tree metrics to guide the teams what to do before sending any waste to any destination. So this ensures teams to focus first of all preventing the waste, and when it is unavoidable, make sure it is redirected back into the food system where it is possible. If you go to the next slide, please. In terms of our progress towards SDG 12.3 target, we have achieved minus 18% reduction in food waste so far, on our way to our goal 50% by 2030. Well, this progress comes from a variety of actions in our end-to-end operations, but if I would top line share a few examples, in manufacturing, we work very closely with our factory teams and some external suppliers to reduce waste at source. We focus on optimizing process lines and using real-time data. We want to be proactive when it comes to waste and not reactive to ensure we can reduce at the spot. Within supply chain, we collaborate very closely with retailers, suppliers, and as well food banks to redirect the surplus food to the right destinations. We work, for example, with Global Food Banking Network across 13 countries globally to ensure good food reaches to the communities in need. For consumers, we raise constantly awareness to reduce waste at home. One example is our partnership with Too Good To Go, a fellow B Corp, whose look, smell, taste logo helps support our best before date transition and encourage people not to throw away food that is still safe to eat, and then to trust as well their senses. I would love to share now a short video with you from our Benelux team that shows how they are actively reducing food waste in their operations. Let's take a look, and I will ask Doris's support for this. Thank you for your attention.
Good morning, Oliver. Starting off the day with a healthy amount of protein, we see. But wait, don't throw it away. 46% of consumers minimize food waste to be more environmentally responsible. That's why we at Danone Benelux launched War on Waste, aiming to have food waste by 2030. Welcome to Danone, Oliver. Here, we see Alice donating products to food banks. This way, we are helping the less fortunate and are giving back to the community. Our Waste Warriors work group reduces food waste across multiple departments. We engage all teams and build awareness around the importance of waste reduction while putting the consumer at the center. Waste reduction is a part of our culture. Our Too Good To Go fridge lets anyone take home products that are close to their best before date. Our quality department continuously works on optimizing the shelf life, ensuring they remain safe and enjoyable for longer periods, with zero consumer complaints. We reassess our portfolio routinely, trying to ensure that the waste from tail SKUs is reduced. Our planning team improves promo forecasting accuracy and optimizes planning to minimize waste. Our supply team is dedicated to finding the perfect balance between product availability and losses, minimizing them and improving efficiency across all operations. Clearance involves selling products that can no longer be sold to our regular retailers. This helped us reduce losses through clearance by 70% last year. This process allows consumers to enjoy our assortment at a lower price
It looks like we may have had a slight technical issue with the back end of that video, but thank you, Gotche, very much for that presentation. We will now go straight on to our poll. So we first We heard from you earlier about your food loss and waste journey and how far along you were. We now want to hear from you about the biggest barriers you're facing with your food loss and waste journey. So I think the poll will be coming up live on your screens any minute now, if it's not already. There we go. So hopefully you can all see that. So fingers on buzzers. What is the biggest barrier your organisation faces? And I'm sure you could probably tick all of them, but the largest one, the most significant one for you and your organisation. So it looks like it's supply chain or operational complexity with 41 votes, 46% of the votes. Yeah. It's still there, but it's lack of data measurement systems closely behind. Well, hopefully the webinar this morning will help you, equip you with some solutions and strategies to help that 18% limited staff capacity or resources, and lack of internal buy-in and prioritisation as well at 14%. So a mixed bag. Thank you very much for your votes, and we will now turn over to Iona, who will hopefully talk about the standard, and it may help you with some of those barriers. So Iona, over to you now.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Iona Huang from Harper Adams University. Following the insightful context provided by previous speakers, I will now take a slightly deep dive into this new standard ISO 20001. We'll look at how it was developed, what it covers, and most importantly, how organizations can use it. To begin, it's helpful to understand where this new standard comes from within the vast ISO ecosystem. Our focus is on the Technical Committee for Food Products, TC34. Within that, a specific subcommittee, SC20, was formed to concentrate solely on food loss and waste. The SC20 focuses on the standardization of food loss and waste management. The scope of this is to provide a framework for food organizations throughout the food chain to actively and effectively measure and reduce food loss and waste. Under SC20, there are 3 working groups. Work Group 1 is responsible for ISO 20001. Work Group 2 handles ISO 20008 about measurement methods. Work Group 3 is working on ISO 20020, focusing on food loss and waste auditor competence. 20008 and 20020, these are 2 complementary key standards which will enhance the practical implementation of ISO 20001. The committee is chaired by Dr. Liz Goodwin, who you have heard from at the start of our webinar today. Liz has got extensive experience in food loss and waste management at RAB and the WRI. This makes her the perfect champion to drive this forward. As Liz mentioned, there are lots of people involved, lots of organizations involved in this significant work. The development is a major international collaboration. You can see from this list just some of the key organizations involved, from organizational bodies to NGOs like World Resource Institute, Zero Waste Scotland, Foundation SSC, Swedish Food Agency, etc. One of the questions in the chat asked whether there are any other developing countries involved in this development apart from Mauritius. You see from this map, the answer is yes. In total, more than 50 countries are participating as either active or observing members. This broad involvement ensures the final standard will be globally relevant and applicable across different economies. Let's look at the timeline for the development of these ISO management system standards. Typically, it follows this multi-stage process. It moves from justification to a preliminary work item to committee draft, and then to a critical stage, the Draft International Standard, or DIS. The DIS stage is when a public inquiry happens. This is a formal opportunity for stakeholders like you to review and comment. After addressing the comments on the DIS, the final draft will be approved for publication. So the ISO 20001 development process involves 5 similar key stages. It takes about 5 years, as mentioned by Liz. We have already completed committee drafts CD1 and CD2, moving towards DIS. After addressing the comments received about DIS through the public inquiry, the final draft will be approved for publication, hopefully in 2027. To support the main standard, as we mentioned earlier, 2 other key standards covering measurement methods and auditor competence are also being developed in parallel, with publication targeted for 2027 as well. This one is for 20008 on measurement methods, and similarly, ISO 20020 for food loss and waste auditor competence is also estimated for publication in 2027. The structure of ISO 20001 is based on the framework of ISO 22000, the international standard for food safety management. This is significant because it means that organizations familiar with the structure and the requirements of ISO 22000 will find the new standard of 20001 easier to adopt. Essentially, as shown here, for 20001, the hazard analysis and control elements were lifted out of the food safety management standard and replaced with a set of new specialized toolkits for food loss and waste management, including specific tools, requirements, and methodologies for analyzing, measuring, managing, and reducing food loss and waste. So who can use the standard? This standard is for everyone, really, regardless of their size. It covers all stages across the food value chain, from primary production to processing, retail, hospitality, and consumer engagement. It has got the flexibility to integrate with existing ISO 22000 for food safety management as well. So what does the standard cover, and how does this framework help an organization implement the target, measure, act actions outlined by Liz and Richard earlier? Central to ISO 20001 is the essential management principles of Plan, Do, Check, Act at 2 levels. A high level structures the entire management system, while a second level embedded into the operations. The high level cycle is like this. So plan, this involves understanding the organization's specific context, establishing clear policies, assigning responsibilities, setting targets, ensuring adequate support, resources, competencies, communication, and proper documentation. Do. This is the implementation phase, which embeds the sub-level Plan, Do, Check, Act. It includes the mentioned food loss waste toolbox, effective operational planning, food loss and waste hotspot analysis, control, implementation, verification, control of non-conformities, implementing traceability, emergency preparedness, and response. Check. Here you monitor, measure, and evaluate performance against the set objectives. Finally, act. Based on the evaluation, you take action to do continuous improvement of the system. It's important to note there are two annexes. One is guidance for actions an organization can take to help consumers reduce food loss and waste, and the other is guidance for SMEs to use the standard. How can ISO 20001 be used in practice? The standard can be used to drive real change. Firstly, integration. As mentioned, you can integrate easily with other ISO standards. And then it enables organizations to perform a gap analysis, set clear reduction targets, embed waste minimization into their daily operations. It provides the framework to monitor and measure food loss and waste. Reporting food loss and waste can be mandatory in some legislations. So the benefits of implementing ISO 20001 are really substantial, both for individual organizations and on a broader scale. Earlier, Liz outlined the huge environmental and economic costs of food waste. Adopting this standard directly addresses those challenges. Organizations adopting ISO 20001 gain clear, measurable benefits, including enhanced operational efficiency and significant cost reductions. Improved compliance with sustainability regulations, enhanced reputation and competitive positioning, increased employee engagement and commitment towards sustainability. Beyond direct organizational benefits, adopting the standard will significantly contribute to the wider global sustainability goals. So including reducing environmental impacts, conserving resources, supporting international alignment and achieving the halving of food loss and waste by 2030. It also makes positive contribution to food security by effectively redistributing surplus food. To summarize, ISO 20001 adoption offers a powerful and globally recognized way to enhance organizations systematically management and reduction of food loss and waste. It enhances organizational efficiency, sustainability, regulatory compliance, and market competitiveness. It strengthens organizational sustainability credentials, aligns global practices, and directly supports the collective goal of achieving UN SDG 12.3. My final and important point is about what comes next and how you can get involved. As mentioned earlier, the draft international standard will be open for public comment soon. This is your opportunity to help shape the final version. I strongly encourage all of you to participate and provide feedback to BSI. So please keep an eye out for announcements from BSI. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Iona, so much for that great overview of what we can expect from the international standard. If I can ask you to keep your camera on and your mic on, and then I'll invite the other speakers to join us, turning their cameras and mics on, and we will kick off with some questions. There's quite a few to get through. I'll stick with you, Iona, for now. We've got one specifically on the ISO, which I can look to answer as well a little bit. So I think you've mostly answered most of it. Will the ISO be provided in different languages for public comment? Will comments be sought with special focus from international food service, hospitality, manufacturing and user communities? So I think hopefully Iona's already kind of answered that question. There's 50 countries represented in the international standards development, and that will be open to the whole general public across those 50 national standards bodies. So do keep an eye out for that. As BSI are the UK's national standards body, we will be collecting public comments from the UK, but that's not to say that you can, anyone around the world can input and get involved in commenting on that international standard. So do keep an eye out for that. There's a question, so building on that, there's a question about the different sectors, so hospitality, manufacturing, user communities. We've got a similar question also about kind of hospitality and catering. So I don't know if anyone can kind of build on that. The question is really around, will the international standard be covering the needs of the hospitality and the catering sectors as well as other sectors? Iona, Liz, did you want to take that one or build on that?
Yes, it definitely does cover. It includes the hospitality sector, and in fact there's some very good examples of hospitality sector already taking action, and it would be great to see some of those organisations actually having a go at registering and getting it registered to ISO 20001. A lot of the big hotel chains have been tackling food waste, as well as many restaurants and other organisations. Richard, I know there are a number who are involved in the RAP Pact that come from the hospitality sector.
Yes, just to add to that, Emily, there's quite a lot of action going on across the world on hospitality food service, reducing food loss and waste. The first organisation that actually hit 50% was IKEA in its own operations, reducing it by 50% in its food offering around the world. The International Food Waste Coalition, which is part of the RAP family, have been working with literally thousands of sites around the world. I think they're up at around 10,000 sites now, with an average reduction of 28%. And that's sort of organisations like Compass and Sodexo and Accor are all part of that process. So very much this standard is relevant to them and can help them act. And also, as we move on to looking at the methodology approaches, then having methodologies that actually fit each part of the supply chain, including hospitality and food service, is really important. The one thing just to emphasize that we have seen in hospitality and food services, when companies actually decide to act, they can act really quite rapidly. And we've seen some very quick reductions in this area. So, this is an area where companies can save money and save money quickly.
Thanks, Richard. That's great. Great to hear that. It applies to all and everyone and everywhere. Also, with the ISO, you've mentioned that it is covering food processing, but there's a question around: is it specifically including upcycling of side streams and kind of looking at that circular element of food waste and loss? Iona, did you want to come in there?
Yeah. Yes, it did. So the one of the areas is about a food waste valorization, for example, and so that definitely covers the side stream.
Brilliant. That's great. That's great. Thanks, Iona. So there's a question here that is maybe for you, Richard. I think it popped up during your presentation. Where material is statutorily removed from food chains, e.g. kind of specified risk material, should this count towards waste figures?
I saw that question, and I think, and Ian will correct me if I got this wrong, but I think it does. I think it's characterised as inedible food waste. So, of course, the challenge. This is an area where there's no doubt there are certain things you can't reduce. I mean, you can't get to zero food waste for exactly reasons like this. So, for example, imagine in the coconut supply chain, there's an awful lot of inedible material that comes through that, and in other areas like meat, you get the same sort of thing. And in certain fruit and veg, it's almost impossible to eat absolutely everything that is grown. So yes, but there is sort of plenty of the edible waste to go at to reduce food loss and waste across the supply chain. So in every sector that we've looked at, it is certainly conceivable, even with a backdrop of inedible waste, to hit 50% reductions. I've not come across the supply chain yet that hasn't been possible. I don't know if Liz or Iona wanted to add to that.
No, I think you're right, Richard. There is always going to be some inedible and some food waste that can't be avoided, and that will be different in different countries because we have different societal norms about what is edible and what isn't edible. But even still, there will be some things which are unsafe to eat and therefore inedible. The standard does it does cover all of those, and I see there have been some other questions which are making similar points. The standard is based on the waste hierarchy, so the minimization approach includes moving things up the hierarchy. So yes, it definitely includes things like upcycling, because that moves things up the hierarchy. Recognizing there will always be some things at the bottom which have to be either converted into energy or sent for some other disposal.
Thank you, Liz. The questions are coming in thick and fast, so we'll try and rattle through a few more. Question here from Claudia: how do you homogenise the handling of data due to its confidentiality? Auditors will be trained in this field to be auditors of this standard, or will auditors be trained in this field to be auditors of this standard? So I don't know if someone wants to take the first part about the data and confidentiality, and then I can take the second part.
I think that there is always going to be an issue about data confidentiality. That's probably true in all standards, because every organisation will want to keep some things to themselves. I think there is a big issue somehow in the whole food waste sector, where not many companies actually want to publish their figures. I personally think it would be useful if they did, but even if it was just being used for their own internal purposes, there's no reason why they couldn't actually retain that data internally, but still be managing and having an improvement system in place within their organisation. So it isn't a necessary requirement for it to be in the public domain. Although I do think it's beneficial if data is in the public domain, because it helps drive improvements and benchmark.
Yeah.
And Emily, if I may just build on that. Just to say that one of the things that the food packs do is collect data across the supply chain, and then tend to publish the data anonymously, and where the data has been aggregated, so that you can't then actually work out exactly which signatory produced which data set. But what that does do is enable you to look for benchmarks across the supply chain, which is very valuable if you understand, okay, so if I'm in the meat industry or in the dairy industry, what does good look like in terms of food loss and waste? Actually, something I'm sure that Danone has been associated with over the way it's been working on food loss and waste. So there are ways around this, and aggregating data could be a good way of doing it, and the food packs could be a good way of being part of that.
Thanks, Richard, and Liz. And just on the auditor question, and there was also a question around mandatory use of the standard. So standards in their nature are voluntary. There are examples where some standards become mandatory, and organisations can then kind of show compliance and therefore can be kind of certified against. But generally, standards are voluntary, and at the moment this standard will remain voluntary, so there won't be mandatory use of that standard. There's also a couple of questions coming in around engaging with small organisations and also kind of SMEs in terms of getting as many voices into the standards development process, and that's a really valid point, and it's something that we're actively always trying to work on. So specifically with regards to getting voices involved in the standards development process, all we can do is really encourage you to when the public draft becomes available, do comment. BSI will send an email out to all registrants of the webinar today, and we will publicly announce when the draft does become available. And we do really encourage as many people to review the standard and comment and share it as wide as you can with your organisations. That the more comments we get, the more we can ensure that the standard does reflect as many viewpoints across the supply chain as possible. Also to address the role of SMEs and how we can engage SMEs generally in standardisation. BSI actively supports SMEs. We have a good partnership with the Federation of Small Businesses, which provides free tools, guidance, and I think access to free standards as well, or perhaps up to 5. So we can share some information on that as well in the follow-up email that goes out to everybody. So I think that addresses a couple. I'm going to have a look at a few more questions here. So it would be helpful to have a food waste standard for the consumer where much waste occurs. Could ISO BSI encourage relevant legislators to act on this? Great question. We've got a couple more around the views of engaging with consumers. I don't know, panel, do you have any thoughts on engaging with consumers and how you can encourage consumers to help reduce their food loss and waste? Obviously, a lot of food loss and waste does come from households. Does the standard go into detail in terms of guiding organisations with how to better communicate to consumers how they can reduce their waste at home?
I'll maybe make a start, and I'm sure the others will come in as well. We have talked for many hours about how to make this apply to consumers, and in particular some of the food waste experts involved in the work were desperately keen to make sure it does cover all the way to the plate, and that's our hope. We need to start somewhere. This is the first version, and it will be the first version, but I think over time we'll be able to improve it and build on it as we get more experience. It does include consumers. The way it's written at the moment is that it's focused largely on businesses, and there's a section on things businesses can do to help consumers and considerations that businesses need to take into account when helping consumers to reduce food waste. It is very difficult to imagine a household becoming registered to ISO 20001. So that's something we can't really get our head around. So it's always going to be the business who gets registered, and then they influence the consumer to help us as householders reduce food waste. You might imagine, and I think there was another question from a local authority, you might imagine a local authority being registered for their role in the whole system, which will be about encouraging businesses in their area, which will be about encouraging consumers through their communications campaigns, through their provision of waste services, etc. But at the moment we're largely focusing on businesses and their role in helping consumers. But it is absolutely our intention that it should cover household food waste.
Thanks, Liz. Gotcha, do you have any views on the consumer perspective from Danone's operations? Has it been a struggle for you? How have you managed trying to communicate with consumers around their food loss and waste?
Yeah, we try to take actions on the waste that is under controllable waste, let's say, which is in our end-to-end operations. However, we are very much aware that the household waste is a large part of the food waste today that is being destroyed. I think one of the key levers that we use is awareness. We have moved to BBD where possible, in Europe especially, and this required conversations with regulators and policymakers as well, so that we could actually transform to the best before there for the consumers, and then a lot of awareness. What does this mean for the consumers when they see a date over there? It's not the end date. You can still use your senses, etc. So that part is, I believe, very important. And what we have done in Europe, I would love to see across the whole world, where we talk together as industry with the regulative partners as well, how we can move more and more to BPD and drive more awareness on the consumer levels to waste less at home. In terms of data collection on that end, of course, it is a challenge. Our partner Too Good To Go provides us few researches how look, smell, taste logo shifts the behavior of the consumers. With the logo, they have seen 70% of the households is more now aware of their senses and use their senses before they throw the waste. It is unfortunately very difficult to though have an estimate of how true it is with the actual loss numbers.
Thanks, Gotcha. But there's a question here about legislation, again, regulators. Well, I think it's more of a comment, but Richard, I'm keen to hear if you've got any thoughts, or if from Rat's perspective, do you have a view on this? That regulators should be reviewing legislation about date markings. What are your thoughts on that, Richard?
Well, to build on what Gotcha said, one of the key things that we found in terms of helping citizens reduce food waste is not only raising awareness with them, which is a key thing, because most people don't think they throw food away. If you don't think you throw food away, you don't think you can act to reduce it. So raising awareness is absolutely key, and then actually helping people change. And there's multiple ways you can do that. One is helping people within the home to do this, but also helping people in the retail environment, and indeed with on-pack information like best before dates, and indeed actually in terms of promotions and pack design, or indeed removing packaging completely for fresh fruit and veg, which is also being shown by research to reduce food loss and waste. So there are multiple things that can be done. Now, what's interesting is that a number of countries around the world, the UK is one, Netherlands another, Japan's another, have looked at their regulations around best before and use by. And obviously with use by, where there's sort of human health at risk here, we've got to have a label which is very, very specific, and the use by does that job quite well. But it is worth noting that in most environments, you can freeze the product up to the end of the use by date. So that's one of the messages that we've come through. In terms of best before, that is guidance, and it's making sure that people are aware that it is guidance. And you can use your sensors, as Gotcha says, to do this. Now, whether you need, sometimes you might need regulation, and we've done this in terms of to encourage food redistribution. And Rat's done some work in the UK, which is on our website, which shows of how to change regulations there, which help get more safe food safely to people in need. That was stimulated particularly during the pandemic. But actually also a lot of it is to do with making sure that there's real clarity around the labels, and only use the labels when you need to. So for example, selling loose fruit and veg with no packaging means that you've got no best before date. It means that you have to rely on your senses to make sure that the food is okay. And when we've looked at that, we found that actually reduces food waste. So there are things you can do here which can make a big difference.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, absolutely. We're going to turn away from this slightly now. There's a question here. How can businesses, and I'm sure many organisations are thinking this, how can businesses balance providing sufficient food variety and volume while minimising food waste? Does anyone want to come in there?
Maybe jump into that one. It's a good question. At Danone, we prioritize delivering nutritious food for our consumers while using data to first of all understand what is the demand from the consumer. However, important to keep in mind to continuously reduce food waste while the volumes could increase. And what we do is we use smart forecasting. And as well, we try to use as much as possible cross-functional ingredients to use to avoid overproduction. We also regularly review our portfolios to understand if this is still matching the needs or not. So I believe what is important is to design variety with intention to meet the consumer expectation, but also while protecting the planet.
Can I just
I
add to that?
agree with you.
Sorry. Yeah. I was going to say, actually, that's where the standard can actually help, because the standard will help you to design a system so that you can actually be more effective in making more informed decisions about your whole procurement or preparation volumes.
Liz,
Yes, I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that, and I think it's about having good planning systems, and if you implement the management system, it should help ensure you have planning systems and you're updating them. I also know that there are some studies going on at the moment which are showing things like AI are actually very helpful in improving the efficiency of planning and improving your efficiency of forecasting.
Thanks, Liz. There's a question here about policy. With government policy focused on measuring and reporting as the key intervention to reduce food waste, how do we come together across the supply chain to actually reduce waste? I think we've covered elements of this, but it'd be good to hear the panelists' views. Where issues are causing food waste is outside of the control of the individual company. How do we look to unite? I think, Richard, you covered a little bit of this in your presentation, but care to elaborate a little bit for this question?
Yeah, and I think this is a really important question, and Gotcha's also sort of talked a little bit about this in her presentation, how you work with your suppliers as well as your customers to reduce food loss and waste. So the critical thing about Target, Measure, Act is you're setting those targets for yourself, for your own company, and your own operations is therefore a target. And you're then starting to think about how you might be able to work as part of the supply chain to reduce food waste across the whole supply chain. Because when RAP first started working in this space, one of the immediate issues came up is, if I reduce food waste in my operations, the business was saying, does that mean I'm actually then creating food waste either upstream or downstream? And of course, that is no good to anybody. So in some cases, the solutions are genuinely supply chain related. And so looking at what you can do within your own operations and then actually working with your suppliers and customers to do this. And that approach is used in many of the food packs around the world and has been very effective. And what you can then do is almost look at a way that's actually mutually beneficial. If you change, for example, simple things, the quantity which is delivered on site of a particular food, if it's too much, that can lead to wastage of that particular food because it's not processed in time. Now, by just adjusting how frequently it's delivered can make a difference in terms of the amount of food waste that you get. And talking to your supplier to help you do that is one way of making this happen. So, yeah, I think working with your supply chain, and this has been encouraged by the standard, is exactly a way of reducing food waste and bringing in economic benefits to the entire supply chain.
Yes, I agree. And I want to say, just add, although the standard is voluntary, it's not mandatory, it is possible the large businesses may in the future require their suppliers, for example, to adopt the standard, and so that together as a supply chain together they enhance the efficiency and reduce food loss and waste.
Thanks, Iona. Gotcha, do you have any views on that from Danone's perspective around how you've managed that, and kind of examples of collaboration outside of Danone's own operations?
Yeah, the external frameworks policies provided by these great experts also in the call today with us is crucial. We keep those in our core before acting. We use REP's Target Measure Act framework, which I believe is free to access. We are also members of Consumers Goods Forum. Although I appreciate it's a membership organization, it is key for us to connect with peers and customers through these platforms. As well, I know there are local initiatives that I believe Richard mentioned some of them as well on food waste pacts driving cross-industry collaborations as well. And food loss waste protocol and this ISO that I'm looking forward to see now also help to standardize common reporting and framework, which is a great guidelines for us as organizations.
Brilliant, thank you. And that is our time up now with 30 seconds left on the clock. So a huge thank you to our wonderful speakers. It's been incredibly insightful to hear from you all today, and I'm sure the audience agrees. So just as we close, there is a BSI report on solutions and strategies to help cutting food waste within the supply chain. So do take a look at that for some guidance and advice. And then, of course, with the ISO standard, the first draft coming out this summer, as Liz said, it is a milestone which we're all extremely excited about. Do keep your eyes peeled. We will send an email out to all registrants of the webinar today when that is available for public comment. It will be available for 12 weeks, so plenty of time to get your comments in. And as I said, do share it far and wide. So that's us time up. Thank you so much, everyone. Once again, have a lovely day and keep cool. Thanks all.